authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce, the Redneck Radio Man. Joining me tonight is Clayton Douglas. He's the author of Mystery Babylon, The New World Order Unveiled. And we're going to be talking about this in the end of time tonight. And Clayton's got quite a bit here he wants to reveal to us. Before we get off onto that, I want to make sure I let y'all know that he's also known as the Free American. His website's www.freeamerican.com. And if you want to call in and ask questions, the number's 832-632-7904. For people who are listening at other places, I invite you to join us at www.talknowradio.com. Membership is free. It'll get you into the chat room. You can talk with each other. You can ask questions in chat. And it just makes the show that much more interactive and that much more fun. So please take me up on my invitation. Clayton, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, sir.
All right, there is one last thing I did forget to mention to everybody. I want to mention real quick. Also to everybody out there listening that has Mac computers, I recently installed a Flash player. I've got two players on my site now. The top one is for Flash. The one under is for Windows Media Player. The Flash will work for Windows and for Mac both. If y'all have trouble with the Windows, just use the Flash. It seems to work all the time. So, Clayton, this is a subject I think you were just mentioning to me that you've really researched. You wrote on it 25 years ago, but if I'm not mistaken, you had actually been studying it for much longer than that. Am I correct?
Well, this is such a multi-layered thing that it's most people are just overwhelmed by the immenseness and the complexity of the matrix that's been built around us. And I started investigating it a long time ago. A lot of years ago, I wondered why they had ever banned our number one cash crop, which was hemp. And of course, being a student of history and my whole life pretty much, you know, I've read about the Great Depression. I've read about what happened in Soviet Union. I've read about, you know, the consequences of the Cold War. I've read about all of the millions of people that have been killed in wars, and it's all been in an effort to create something that really has no business existing, and that's a one-world government. This is centralization carried to the utmost, and in order for a man to be free, I don't believe we can deal with that. So I've written about that in a number of different modes, and I think I volunteered for Vietnam in 1964 after I watched them kill Kennedy. And by the way, it wasn't Oswald. and I got involved in the Vietnam vets, the POW, after Vietnam. I didn't go, but I volunteered there, and the Army kind of tried to kill me before that. I wrote my first novels 45 years ago, and I did that in prison doing time for marijuana. What I wrote about in the 45 years ago was what this country would be like if we legalized marijuana. If we abolished laws against victimless crimes. And in retrospect, looking back with everything I've done in the Patriot movement, with everything I've done in the militia movement, everything I've done in the paraphernalia industry or the legalization of restoration of our number one cash crop. Everything has been pointing me in the right direction. I think I've been moving in the right direction. The novels that I wrote 45 years ago, when it was pretty much a life sentence to get caught with pot in Texas, now you can smoke it in 19 states and not have to worry about going to prison if you bribe a doctor.
Right. And then there was also a time that when it was still called hemp before they called it marijuana, that it was not only legal, but it was used in everything from clothing to sails to, for ships to, packing material and God knows what else.
Oh, how about the Constitution? How about the Bill of Rights? All that was written on hemp paper. Encyclopedia Britannica was printed for 100 years on hemp paper. Oh, let's see, who caused that to be demonized and made illegal? Oh, that was the DuPonts and the guy with the castle over there in California.
Oh, God.
William Randolph Hearst.
Okay.
He tried to make it into a racist thing, and their tactics really ain't changed much. I mean, I get called a racist all the time doing my radio show because I think we got a right to ask somebody for their ID.
Well, and this is not me, but I think I've read, haven't you also been labeled an anti-Semite as well?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Right after what happened at Waco, I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and totally separate project, but I started publishing the Free American, and I started the militias. Now, suddenly Jewish groups like the ADL and Southern Poverty Law started attacking this old biker from Texas, accusing me of being a racist, accusing me of being an anti-Semite because I believe in the Second Amendment. What part of the Second Amendment don't you understand? This is what I do. Yes, I started the militia. I did it in the governor's office. The governor just ran for president, and that's who we should have had for president if anybody was able to, know who's running for president, since the media don't tell you.
Yeah, there's a lot that I hear the media don't tell us, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes with the Catholic Church that I'm pretty sure you write quite a bit of that in your book, Mystery Babylon. You cover a lot of that material, am I correct?
Yes, sir. And the lies and deception, I mean, Jesus told us about the Jews who say they're Jews but are not, are of the synagogue of Satan. Now, that ain't a racist quote coming from Clay Douglas. That's coming right out of your Bible.
Well, it wasn't really racist if you think about the fact, and I'm glad you said what you did, that he said Jews that say they are that are not. Jews are Semites. There's a group of them there they call crypto-Jews that are Jews claiming to be Jews. There's Israelites that are claiming to be Jews that are not Jews, that are not necessarily Semites either. And a lot of people don't realize if you're targeting these crypto Jews, you're not talking about Semites necessarily.
Well, it's actually worse than that. 90% of the so-called Jews around the world, in Israel, in New York, in Miami, are what they consider Khazarian Jews.
Right.
They came from the Black Sea area, which is probably occupied with Ukraine, which is why they starved out 11 million people in the Ukraine. It's why it's the biggest fraud. And this information comes to us from Jews. It's not me making this up to make Jews sound bad. This is what Benjamin Friedman, this is what, it's telling you this is what happened in World War II. This is what happened. The Zionists did this. The Zionists did that. Here's what the bankers did. Here's what the Rothschild did. Yeah, some of them may be Jewish. Some of them may. We don't know what they are, but we do know that if they're doing something that is evil, that is not good for the people, for the citizens of this country, then they're the bad guys, and we got to defeat them. I wrote books about this. I've got fiction books about this. Some of them set in the future. As a matter of fact, one Bloody Alabaster Eye, I wrote a future segment 10 years ago, and now 10 years later, we see the FEMA camps, we see the foreign troops, we see everything I predicted 10 years ago in one chapter, or in the beginning of a few chapters in one of my fiction books. It's all happening. And the second book was about attack on a nuclear power plant. Can you say Fukushima? That wasn't the name I used, but that's what happened.
So a lot of this stuff, at the time you wrote it, you had no clue it was going to happen, or you knew
right.
you knew it was, but you wrote it as fiction anyway.
Well, I don't know. It's almost a strange thing. I mean, I have one book that is a story about something that happened to my character 10 years ago. And he wakes up and he has this dream that he's 20 years in the future, that he's a soldier, and he really doesn't know, and you don't know by the time you finish reading the book, whether he was maybe hallucinating, wounded in a battlefield somewhere in the future, remembering his past, or if he's in the present, or the present 10 years ago, whatever was the present at that time, and getting insight of something that's happened for a future time. And on that line of thought, I've got stories about Lucifer. I've got a whole novel ready to go. I'm just in the process of editing, called The Legends of Lucifer. And I wrote it 45 years ago, but I've been researching it for that long at least. And I've come to conclusions that we've been deluded as Christians and misled by these Pharisees that Jesus railed against for 5,000 years, maybe more.
Well,
it may go back to the fact that we were actually bred and trained and raised to be slaves for some global overseers that possess technology that they have to this day. And I mean, space travel, the ability to move objects that weigh tons. I'm talking about anti-gravity. I'm talking about laser drilling and certainly computer placement based on astrological terms. There was no way, if we were an ancient, a caveman type of society,
right,
that this would have been happening. And so I've got novels about that too.
Okay, now in the chat room, Jim was saying Vatican Bank turned in German war bonds. They were the only ones able to make Swiss banks pay off. Do you know anything about that? I'm
sure the Catholic Church has been the new world order of this world. It's kind of like saying the Catholic Church and the Bank of England, Queen of England. Gee, who's got the most property? Who owns the most? How closely do they cooperate? And you can do the same thing with the Republicans and Democrats over here. These people are masters at psychology. They're masters at propaganda, and they've been ruling us and probably using us as slave labor for probably 150,000 years, since they found structures that we still can't build today that's 150,000 years old down in South Africa.
So you're saying that they've probably been doing this here since the very beginning of time?
I believe so. I believe we're on an eternal battle of good against evil. I think God's alive and well on the internet. God's alive and well. He holds the atoms together. On this table I got here and this body I got here, something's holding the atoms together. I don't know what that is, beyond my range of expertise. But I've always asked myself, well, what if I was omnipotent and omniscient? What would I be? Well, the answer you get is God. And I think the true answer is that you're bored to tears. If you're the only one of your kind in the universe and there's nobody around smart enough to talk to you, they can do what you do, you gotta be bored shitless. So what you do, you create us, you create man, and behind our eyes, you watch our development. You see how Clay gets along with Royce. And it's kind of like Shakespeare said, the whole world's a stage, and we're the actors. And
yeah, pretty much God experiences life through us, in other words.
That's right. You're born with free will. So you have the choice here. Right now, folks. Right now, you got the choice. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? You want to do good? Or you want to sit back at that titty bar there and scarf down a few more drinks for you to drive home?
Well, there are some that would say that titty bar scarfing down drinks is good.
Well, I've done it a few times. I've tried it. It can be enjoyable. But then again, it's one of the problems I think we've got is everybody wants you to be a good Baptist or a good Methodist or a good Buddhist or a good Muslim or a good Jew. And I'm sorry, that just ain't for me. I ain't gonna bang my head against no wailing wall. I ain't sticking my nose in the dirt, my ass up in the air. And I ain't getting on my hands and knees and praying for a Cadillac. I ain't gonna do that.
Well, I'm kind of the opinion myself that I prefer to be pro-God and anti-religion. I don't really honestly, Clay, to be totally truthful with you, believe that any of these religions have God's backing. I believe that most all of them man-made inventions at one level or another. I
think you're absolutely right. And in the novels that I've still got coming out this year they'll be out this year. We haven't talked about Mystery Babylon, but let me tell you, folks, that's a history of the whole advent of the New World Order from Jesus' time to right now. This is how they dealt with me. This is what they tried to do to silence me. And this is the history of the Rothschild. They've been running this for 300 years. I'm telling you that you got the power to take it away from them. And I believe that's what scares them about me. I'm not trying to make anybody depressed. Yeah, we got a world government. Yeah, they're real upfront about it. So anybody that hadn't been dumbed down by the fluoride or programmed by the television ought to be able to read a few headlines, read a few manuals, read a few good books about history, and you'll see that we're really in the war here. They really do want to enslave you. And just because you can get in that pickup and go get a beer don't mean you're free, cupcake. A limited amount of freedom. You're not sovereign. They want you to be a subject. They want you to be a serf. They want you to work on the corporate farm because that's how this communism, fascism works. It's based on slave labor, I believe, Royce.
Okay, we got Jim here in the chat room again. Pardon me. Sorry, something scratched my throat. And he's saying, premise then is good and evil, yin and yang, so should be a devil. So there should be a devil. Now, what I told him, and I thought I'd run this by you, see what you think, is good equals God, evil equal devil. What would you say to him after what he said?
I don't think evil could exist without God. God created us for His entertainment. He gave us free will. So if you want to rape women, you want to molest children, they made men like me to kill people like you. And if I kill a demon-possessed, child-molesting, woman raping, murderer, I don't think I should have to house him for 15 years either. I think, you put that hemp right to work after a jury of his peers finds out he ain't worth living on the planet with the rest of us.
Now, I'm not sure if I understand Jim's question on this one, but I'm going to read it to you and see what you think. He says, if God is bored, then He allowed evil as a choice. Now, I'm not sure, but I guess he's trying to say, did God allow evil to break the boredom? But I could be misunderstanding that.
Yeah, He did it as a test, see if you were smart enough to exist on this planet.
Well, that and this is just me This is just me talking now, Clayton. But talking out of my own common sense, it would appear to me that if you had free will, you might never have to have good and evil in order for people to be able to choose. Because without no good and evil to choose from, where is the free will if only one exists?
Well, now, that's kind of the one problem that I have with the whole Adam and Eve story in the Bible.
Okay.
Why would God not want you to know the difference between good and evil unless it was because God was evil? Now, what if this Lucifer was the good guy? What if Lucifer wanted to free man from this 5,000-year-old slavery, build a pyramid slave type atmosphere? What if Lucifer wanted to set us free from that and said, here's how, if you know the difference between good and evil, this is why God didn't want you to eat this tree. This is why God didn't want you to smoke that plant, because God was just another demon pretending to be God. Whether you want to call him Lord, whether you want to call him Tetragrammaton, whether you want to call him Yahweh, any God that was ordering his servant to murder his son ain't the kind of God I want on my side. How about you?
Well, no, but then too, coming from a Christian background, I know a lot of Christians would say, well, he didn't really want to sacrifice his son. That was just a test. He let him off the hook. And this is true, but that's getting inside of God's head and speaking for his motives. And who can do that for anybody else? I mean, they don't really know that.
Yeah, well, that's a matter of speculation.
Right, exactly.
What I just said about Lucifer being a good guy can actually be backed up by a lot of esoteric text, chapters they left out of the Bible, the church, and I've often said that I think possibly that at the Council of Nicaea, they kicked Jesus up to status of God because they didn't want men like you and I aspiring to be the kind of man Jesus was when he walked this earth. And Jesus tried to tell you that you can do what I do and more. My disciples can do more than I do. You can reach more people. You can communicate.
Okay, now Jim was saying that he asked that question because he's done exorcism and he believed there's an evil. Before that, he did not allow himself to think that there was a devil. And I understand where he's coming from, but from my own personal opinion, and I can't speak for him or you, it seems like there could be evil spirits without there being a quote-unquote devil or Satan ruling over them, in other words. That's not to say there ain't, but I mean, looking at all possibilities is my point.
It could be. I think, I've read enough science fiction. I read every science fiction book in the Fort Worth Public Library before I was 14. So I grew up to Robert A. Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and some other greats like that. And that's why I do what I do. I like to write. I do the radio show because actually doing the magazines that I've done for the last 20 years and writing the books, it just ain't happening fast enough right now. We really need to know what's going on here, that our very lives are being threatened by this whole New World Order plan, whether it's Jews, whether it's Israel, whether it's the Vatican, whether it's a bunch of little gray aliens from the planet Bacchus. It don't matter. It don't matter, folks. What matters is that there are ways we can combat this. There's ways we can oppose it, and we've been smart enough and bright enough for well over 100 years, Royce. We've had the technology to set mankind free, truly free. Not enslaved by your electric bill, not enslaved by your gas bill. The technology is out there. They just don't want you to have it. I mean, can you imagine the outrage if the average American, television watcher suddenly realized that Barack Obama just went to the moon for lunch and was back in time in the White House by the time supper got around and didn't have to use a drop of oil to get there.
Right.
And I think that's the secret behind the UFOs. This is why they're top secret. And again, I wrote about UFOs being 5,000 years old in some of my novels.
Well, I wanted to redirect you back to something you said a few minutes ago about the Rothschilds because I think I mentioned to you I've done a lot of reading on this subject over the years myself. And one of the things I've read about, and I'm quite sure you have too just by talking to you, is the satanic bloodline, the 13 satanic families, of which the Rothschilds are just one. Would you like to talk about them in a little bit more detail? Maybe tell the listeners who some of these here families are?
I have experienced shapeshifters. I've experienced a lot of harassment, and some of it may be satanic. Some of the people that have done investigation believe it's satanic. And I don't necessarily, since Lucifer is a main character in some of my novels, I don't operate under, since Lucifer is only mentioned about one time in the whole Bible, I think somebody took a name and tried to make somebody that was trying to do good into a bad guy, almost exactly what the ADL and Southern Property Law has done to me over the last 20 years since I started the militia and since I dared to print a magazine that they refer to as a conspiracy theories magazine.
Yeah, and the only place that he's mentioned that, now that you're talking about that, is in, I believe it was Isaiah 14 verse 12. But that was also, some people have claimed, not even a real reference to the devil, but somebody living of that time, I think the king of Tyre, and that's who that message was really meant to go to, and that it's been misrepresented by religions. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've read.
Well, I'd say in this universe, almost anything that you can imagine is not only possible, it's probable and probably already happened somewhere, sometime, some beach, somewhere, And that's really what I want to do with my future. I've made the decision that I'm only writing fiction now. Since the fiction I wrote 45 years ago Ain't fiction.